this episode, I had the honor to talk with the great Paul Tremblay. Paul is a Bram Stoker award-winning author. His works include The Cabin at the End of the World, A Head Full of Ghosts, Survivor's Song, and The Pallbearers Club. These titles are only scratching the surface of Paul's work, so make sure to take a deep dive in all his horror madness. Had a great time talking with Paul. We also talked a bit about music and stuff towards the end. Some nerdy gear talk and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoy this episode. After you're done with this episode, make sure you check out my fellow horsemen of the podcast Apocalypse, Everything Went Black podcast, Into the Necrosphere, the Necromaniacs podcast, Break the Apocalypse, Iblis Manifestations, and the Soul Knocks podcast. Also something new that I haven't announced yet or whatever on the podcast. I have a merch store now. It's through Teespring. It's the Harwolf 666 Teespring store, and have like shot glasses, pint glasses, mugs, t-shirts, long sleeves. You got stuff for the winter there. You got some like pullovers, regular sweatshirts, hoodies, stuff like that. So yeah, check that out. It's the Harwolf 666 Teespring store, and grab yourself some merch. Lastly, don't forget to give me a rating on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcast at, if you dig what I do. And you can follow me on social media, Harwolf666 on X, also Facebook, Instagram, and all those places. So, yep, I appreciate you listening, and hope you enjoy this episode as a good kickoff to the October season, because it's now among us, and the best time of the year. So thanks so much. Well, Paul, I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Hope you're having a good day so far.
Yeah, pretty chill. It's been gray for a while here up in Massachusetts. A lot of rain. The sun might come out later, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's been the same down here. I'm in South Carolina and stuff, and it's been raining like for the past week. So It's been really nasty. Yeah.
You're near Charlotte? I'm not Charlotte. Are you near Charlestown or?
Yeah,
Charleston?
I'm actually in Charleston. Charleston's my home base. So.
No, Charlestown's in Massachusetts. That was Massachusetts slipping out. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, it looks like we're sharing the same weather, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I've been a fan of yours for a while now. Like, yeah, the first novel I read from you was The Cabin at the End of the World, and I thought that was killer. Then here comes the movie, not that far after, so that's pretty cool.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, really dig that one. So.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's been sort of somewhat fun seeing the reactions to the movie and the book and vice versa.
Yeah, I think the movie did a pretty decent job of staying with the book, in my opinion.
Yeah, for the first, at least like 2/3 of it. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your inspiration of writing The Cabin at the End of the World?
So sorry, just thinking back.
No worries.
It's funny, like the sort of the what if or the kernel sort of happened while I was on an airplane. I had just been to Los Angeles for like a literary festival, and while I was there, my editor had rejected a novel proposal. My agent was crushed, but I was actually kind of relieved because I don't know. I wrote way too much for this novel proposal. I wrote like 30 pages, and I was kind of dreading, am I going to spend like a year writing this? I feel like I already wrote it. So when she rejected, I was like, oh, okay, I'll try to come up with something else. And it wasn't like, we don't want to work with you. I'd been through that process with her previously, where I'd sent her some ideas and we worked back and forth. So anyway, I happened to be on an airplane, trying to come up with some ideas, and I had a little notebook out, and at one point when I stopped paying attention to what I was doing, I noticed I doodled like a little cabin in my notebook, and I was like, a cabin sort of made me instantly think of a home invasion story, and that's sort of like my least favorite kind of horror movie or horror story, probably because it's just so realistically icky,
right?
That it could happen. But also, like, I don't know, I think there are so many versions of that story where the the movie or the books that are really just leans into the violence for the sake of violence. I'm not anti-violence, but I don't know. There's just something about there's a line in those home invasion stories, and they can be really blurry. Anyway, uh, I was oddly or weirdly excited by the challenge of, oh, okay, I don't like home invasion stories, but how would I rate one that I would want to sit through?
Right.
Um, yeah, and that was sort of the start of it.
That's cool, and I feel with you on the home invasion stuff, man. That's my least favorite genre when it comes to horror movies and stuff because it's too much of a thing of reality. I don't like that. I rather when we watch a horror movie, I want something to be more like fantasy, some far
Hmm.
fetched stuff, But home invasion stuff is hits really close.
Yeah, no, I definitely tend to prefer like supernatural or psychological type of horror stories or movies myself. But there's always exceptions to every rule, which is sort of the fun part of horror, I guess.
Well, I love the spin you put on the cabinet end of the world. So that was definitely a cool twist at the end there. Had me sitting at the edge of my seat there reading and stuff like, is this going to be real? Like, are they really saying this end of the world? If you
Right.
don't kill your daughter and stuff, and it's like it just keeps you like guessing the whole time, which is really cool.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted it to, the book to be ambiguous because I thought that really sort of reflected sort of what we're living through now. The idea that every time we open our phone or look at the TV or log onto our computer, it feels like the world's ending or world's ending somewhere. So I really wanted to try to play on those sort of real life anxieties and ultimately not answer the question as to whether or not something super or whether or not the world was ending or not.
Yeah, I like that. I like when the ending is kind of left up to you to choose and stuff. So it's something that Stephen King does too sometimes with his endings. Like doesn't like just nail it shut for you. You know what I mean? It's kind of
Mhm.
leave it up to you. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I've always appreciated, every story is different. It depends on what the story needs, right? But I tend to appreciate, books or even movies where, the author or the filmmaker, I don't know, trust the reader to make up, to fill in some of the blanks, to have to do a little bit of work themselves, to have to, think about sort of the implications, et cetera.
Yeah, I definitely dig that. That's definitely a cool thing. So, what are some of your favorite like authors like from the past and like now? Who are you reading now?
Well, so I mean, probably like most horror writers, I think Stephen King was definitely like one of my first. But
Mhm.
uh, but I came to reading sort of late. I didn't really become a reader until my early 20s. So my first exposure was always film. So even then, Stephen King was there because I was watching all these 80s adaptations of Stephen King movies. Um, but one of the first short stories that really sort of lit the fire in me to become a reader was Joyce Carol Oates' "Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been?" I sort
Mhm.
of randomly was in a like a lit 101 class, like as a senior, second semester senior in college. I had to fulfill a requirement. And I remember thinking when I read that story, oh, like I didn't know people wrote things like this. And shortly after that, I'd read The Stand and then sort of just fell into like a king hole. A king hole? That sounds weird. Stephen King rabbit hole is probably better. Thanks to like Dance Macabre, like and the fact that he co-wrote a book with Peter Straub, like I found Peter Straub and Shirley Jackson and Clive Barker and so many of these other writers. So I don't know because I was a math major in college. Once I had the weird itch to try writing a story, I always felt like I was playing catch up because I wasn't an English major and I hadn't read all the classics and that's both sort of a little bit of a source of pride, but also it helps keep me motivated because I'm always nervous like, oh, I have to read more because I didn't read you know enough when I was younger, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know, Kurt Vonnegut was really important to me at the beginning as well when I first was messing around with stories. But I don't know, people I'm reading now are really so many. Uh, there are so many great horror writers working today, like John Langan and Nathan Ballingrud and Nadia Bolkin and Mariana Enriquez and Laird Barron. There are just so many, and Stephen Graham Jones and Victor Laval. So all those people who I've just about everybody I've named, I've had the privilege of getting to know personally uh, in some way too. So they, not only do I consider them friends, but they're also inspirations. They make me want to be better because every time I read something by them, I'm blown away.
That's always cool when you have good friends and all that kind of inspire you, make you work harder, and just like it helps with the creative process. Like with the podcasting thing that I do, I have a group of really good friends. We're called the Horsemen of the Podcast Apocalypse, and we all have like a different like subject matter that we deal with. There's like a horror podcast besides mine. There's like two horror
Mhm.
podcasts, a metal podcast. You got a cult podcast.
Nice.
Everything's kind of touched on, and we all support each other and stuff like that, and share everything. And I don't know, it's just a really good motivation to keep moving forward with things.
Yeah, for sure. Motivation. I mean, it's helpful to be able to share, the experience that you're going through with other people.
Yeah, most definitely. And touching back on what you said with Stephen King there, like when you go down the rabbit hole, Stephen King, I don't think you really ever come out of that rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, obviously, I mean, he's a one of a kind, and it's just been amazing how, like, to see, and even like, so I teach high school math, and it's been sort of fun to see, like, almost like these epochs, like an anthropologist, you see sort of like one age of King end, and then you see sort of like another one begin. Like when I first started teaching in the mid 90s, mid to late 90s, I would ask, hey, what's the scariest movie you'd ever see? As like an extra credit question.
Hmm.
And a lot of kids were writing down It. But,
Oh,
the
nice.
Tim Curry It, the TV movie It.
Right.
And then there was, I think around the time of his accident, he was he was just physically unable to publish like, one or two books a year for a few years there. So it felt like, things had quieted a little bit. I mean, obviously horror writers knew of Stephen King, but then it was like he exploded again within the pop culture with, uh, with the It reboot. So now it's sort of funny, like, 25 years later, asking these kids what's their scariest movie, and they'll say It, but they mean the one that was just released in the theaters fairly recently.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's like now this generation is fucking scared of Stephen King as we were back in the day, with the original It miniseries, which I still think is one of the scariest things to ever come on TV.
Yeah, so I haven't watched it in so long. I'm sure it would feel dated in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I mean, I think just Tim Curry just nails nails that performance. He's so creepy. Uh, there's it's not quite a wax museum, but there's a horror museum in Salem, Massachusetts called Count Orlok's Nightmare Gallery.
Hmm.
So he has essentially like mannequins or things that are made up to look like certain horror things. And he's got a Tim Curry It in there that just looks so lifelike. It's so unsettling. I don't know how they made it to have like the eyes of that just look so realistic. But anyway, but yes, Tim Curry as Pennywise is very disturbing.
Yeah, he's definitely iconic. I would put him up there with like Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, in that category of just like things that fucked you up as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also still think the original It miniseries is superior to the films, but it is cool that the films are out there for the newer generation, so I do appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. I have to admit, I only saw the first movie. I didn't see the second one. But I enjoyed the first movie, or parts of it, I should say. But it's weird to be like, oh, like, no, if I read this, I've seen it made once, but which is fine. Like that movie wasn't necessarily made for me. It was certainly, as most movies are these days, made for younger audiences.
Another one of your books I wanted to touch on or whatever, which is this is probably one of my favorite books I've read in a long time. Even though I'm a little late to reading this one, I just read this one this year. Is A Head Full of Ghosts.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I really dug like there's some serious like Exorcist vibes in there, but once again, there's a twist, and I don't want to like give nothing away, but that twist towards the end is like, man, that kind of threw me on my head.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that I mean that book definitely sort of helped. Excuse me. That book definitely helped. I don't know, give me a sort of a second shot at a career because I'd had a couple of crime novels published in like 2009, 2010 that didn't go so well. So that book sort of saved me. So it's definitely a special book for me. But thank you. I'm so glad it worked for you. And it was fun. Like once I knew I couldn't avoid talking about The Exorcist, the William
Hmm.
Peter Blatty elephant in the room, it sort of opened me up to be able to talk about just about any horror thing that I could think of, within the context of the book. And
Hmm.
hopefully the fun part was, again, not a spoiler, but things are left ambiguous as to whether there's something supernatural going on. And my hope was like mentioning and referencing and coming close to all these different previous stories and films would make it harder to figure out what was really going on.
Yeah, and I still have my thoughts on it. Like, I'm not 100% sure what the hell happened at the end there, if it was all like, supernatural or not, and I think that's cool, man. I love the lingering effect of that.
Yeah, thanks. I know it's a big ask, especially for a novel, as opposed to a short story, to have like such a large thing be ambiguous. When I say a large thing, like whether or not someone was actually possessed by something. So I certainly didn't want it to feel like a cheap sort of twist or a cheap trick by the author. I do take that part of it seriously. Like, hey, I'm asking you to read 300 pages with me. So if something's going to be left ambiguous, it has to be because there's no other way to tell that story. Right? It has to be part of the theme. It has to be part of why, hopefully, that the story is effective. That because it's ambiguous, that makes it a little bit more, hopefully, frightening or unsettling, or it lingers with you. But thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And also with this book, what were some of your inspirations?
Oh, I mean, I think we, certainly covered the most of them, but I would say that the book started actually with some nonfiction. I was actually like 100. So this was like February of 2013. I was like 100 pages into a different book, and I was really stalled out on it. Wasn't going anywhere. So I was really looking for excuses not to write. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do all this different sort of research, and I'm not quite sure how I justified it to myself. But I was like, oh, I'm going to get this really expensive, beautiful book from Centipede Press about the movie The Exorcist. Centipede Press has published a bunch of books about that center on movies, and it's in the Night Film, I think is what they call their series. But anyway, so they had a book of essays and interviews, dealing with The Exorcist. And when I read that, I don't know, it kind of like it floored me a little bit in some ways, because I've always thought of The Exorcist as, oh, here's this like super scary movie. I never really thought about it in terms of like in the context of its time when it came out, and in some of the wider context of its politics and stuff like that. I just thought that was all really interesting, fascinating stuff. And after reading those essays, I kind of sat back and I was like, Hollywood hasn't stopped pumping out possession type stories, and usually they're at least it was in 2013, PG-13 sort of rated stuff. It's like no one's really written an exorcist or a possession story in a long time. Like the only couple that I could think of that I had read, and both were excellent, were Sarah Grant's Come Closer and Daryl Gregory's Pandemonium. So I was like, oh, how would I write a possession novel or story? And like right off the bat, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to do it like from a very skeptical, secular point of view, which was sort of the very beginning. But once I got into the book, I was like, oh no, this needs to be evenly balanced. Like I really need to try to keep it even as to whether or not like something supernatural is happening or something not supernatural is happening. So like to the point where like I divorced myself from thinking there's a true ending to this book. Because I get asked all the time about the ending of the book. I'm like, I don't know. I might have an opinion on it, but like, it's really up to the reader.
That's cool. And also going back to the book, that one scene at the dinner table, man, that one won't leave you for a while,
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I kind of, even though, like I said, I would never dream of telling somebody, hey, it's not supernatural, because it could be. But I did want like some of which I thought most disturbing scenes were going to be the ones that could be most easiest described as like as realism and not necessarily supernatural. Like, I don't know, I guess not a huge spoiler, but also the book's been out for a long time. But like, the conversation where sort of Marjorie threatens to rip out Mary's tongue, I always sort of liked that scene and thought it was kind of disturbing, but also like realistic. And as you mentioned, sort of the family dinner scene toward the end. But even like sort of that sort of riffs a little bit on, a Shirley Jackson novel. So, so again, like, who's telling the story? So I think my hope is all of that would just make everything murky, like treating the ambiguity instead of like, I never imagined I was withholding information from the reader. I always thought I was just giving the reader every possible piece of information that existed,
right.
Or as much as I could in the 300 pages. So the idea was that, we don't know for sure what happened, but it's because we've had this glut of information. We don't know which piece is correct and which piece is incorrect. I don't know, because it's like living in this part of the 21st century, in the misinformation age, right?
Oh
The
yeah,
idea of we're just
definitely.
bombarded with all this stuff. Um, yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was a long ramble, but thank you.
No worries, man. No worries. But yeah, I would love to see this one made into a film. I think it would be fucking great. Like I said, we still have a bunch of possession type movies here and there and stuff, but usually like rated PG-13, and they're usually this like the normal type stuff that
hmm
usually not great. But I think this kind of, I think this would be a good one for a movie.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's come close a couple times. I mean, it's still, I mean, everything's on hold right now with the writer's strike. You know, the
Yeah.
fact I got the force majeure letter from the from the financier, which is essentially saying like the clock on the option is going to be put on hold until the strike is over. So yeah, so we'll see. There seems to be some momentum going forward again, but who knows? It's very hard, as I've learned, to it always seems to be a minor miracle when something actually makes it all the way through.
Right. Well, I could totally see this one streaming on Shutter as like a Shutter original. Like I think it would fit perfectly on Shutter. So,
Yeah, we'll see.
when it goes to the like with the Exorcist films or whatever, I know you said Exorcist like one like was did what it did back in the day with the extremes of the possession all that stuff. But out of the like I guess I would call it the trilogy of the Exorcist, the first three films. Do you have like a favorite of those?
I mean, it's definitely the first. Actually, I have to admit, I've never seen the second. Um,
You're not missing much.
yeah, that's what I figured. That's what I've heard. The third is actually a lot of fun, and there are definitely some great moments in it.
Yeah.
And George C. Scott, he's like full George C. Scott in that movie. So how can you not enjoy that? Um, yeah, the first is still, my favorite. I think, certainly the most effective. It's funny, my daughter, who's 18, just watched it for the first time. She's like,
Oh,
it
wow.
was all right. I'm like, oh, right. I guess. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I don't know. It's just, it's interesting, because I mean, obviously it's still I mean, anything that's been made going on 50 years now is certainly something, an artifact from time too. I don't know. I think given all the horror movies and possession stuff that have come since The Exorcist, I can totally see if someone's like consumed and seen all these different horror movies, from the last 20 plus years already, and then go back and see The Exorcist, you're kind of like, oh, I've probably seen like most of this before.
Hmm.
But seeing it when I saw it, were still the shocks to me were new to me anyway. I found it, and still think it is a pretty, affecting movie.
Yeah, most definitely. It's still like the scariest film my dad's ever seen. He got to see when it first came out when he was a kid
Mm,
and stuff. And I let him revisit The Exorcist, whatever, on DVD, like maybe a few years ago or whatever, maybe 5 years ago. Anyways, I let him borrow the DVD and stuff. And he tells me, yeah, I was watching about halfway through and I heard something drop in the other room. So I went there and turned that off. I can't finish it. I was like, damn.
nice.
Yeah. So it's cool to see it still has that effect after all these years.
Yeah, yeah.
I've also come to appreciate the third one a lot more, like you're saying. Like the third one's just fucking, it's fun, and I don't know, it's really close to the first one with me when it comes to which one I prefer better. Like the third one's really grown on me over years. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. The pair of scissors, no pun intended. The two scissor scenes to me are certainly stand out. Um, yeah, I mean, sort of like a bonkers story though, like the dream sequence, but he goes to like heaven. That's just such a bizarre movie at times.
and I think
Um,
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is up there too,
yeah, I
or is it
forget
Patrick
which.
Ewing? It's Patrick Ewing.
I
I
think
keep
it's
forgetting.
Patrick Ewing. Yeah,
Yeah, Patrick Ewing. Yeah,
yeah.
so bizarre. So here I guess I'm gonna backtrack a little bit or whatever, but what got you into writing? Like, what's your origin story on getting into writing and stuff?
It's sort of like weird to explain, or still sort of weird to me as to like how or why I started doing it. Because
Mm,
I mentioned earlier, I teach high school math, and I was a math major in college and went to grad school for math. Um, but while I was in grad school, I was doing a long distance relationship thing with my girlfriend, who's my wife. So that's where I had more free time to like read. That's why I fell in love with reading.
mhm.
And I don't know, after a couple of years of just reading all these King and other books, uh, I definitely had this itch to try. I had this weird itch to try writing a story. Also, at the same time, like I was teaching myself how to play guitar. I was and am a big music fan, and honestly, if I say this all the time, so if anyone's listening to this that's heard me speak before, they're probably bored hearing it. But If I could go back in time and choose, semi-successful musician over writer, I probably still would. But really for the mid 80s, the mid to late 90s, writing and music were sort of two things I was messing around with, and both very much like hobbies. I eventually figured out I was a better writer than musician. So I don't know, I just stuck with it like very slow and steady. Um, you know, Writing my first stories in those late 80s and then trying to sell them in the early 2000s, much different sort of publishing landscape. Um, I think the best thing I ever did though was like I refused to just give my stories away, refused to just like throw them out into the world. Partly just because like as someone with a math background, I didn't write stories. Like, man, this was a lot of hard work. I'm not giving this away for free. Someone's
Right.
got to pay me something. So I got a lot of rejections. In some of my stories after being rejected by all the biggest markets, when I sold them, they got like $25 or maybe as low as 10. But I always made sure I submitted to paying markets to get something.
Hmm.
Um, so so that first part of my, I guess, learning how to write was I was learning from getting rejections, and once I got better, I would see the rejections sort of were like of a different kind, and the editor would offer advice and stuff like that. So I tried to take that to heart. I was also reading some books on writing and things like that. Eventually, in the mid 2000s, I did join like just friends, a very friendly sort of writers group that we would meet once a month. That was very helpful too. But I was, gave myself permission to be patient. It wasn't like I was trying to, pay my mortgage bills with writing. So that was always good that I had the teaching job. I never felt like a financial stress component to the writing side of things.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I'm not a super exciting writing story, but that's it.
um, Going back to being a musician, what do you play?
Oh, I play guitar. I could be someone's super mediocre rhythm player.
I'm also a rhythm player, so
Yeah, nice.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's still fun. I still mess around with it. Um, my son, who just graduated college, is big into music, which is, he's into different kind of music than I am, but he's a very talented producer and actually musician himself. Like he writes his own stuff and puts it out.
Mhm.
But for my novel, The Pallbearers Club, which came out last summer, which is very sort of autobiographical to sort of lean into that meta-ness. He and I put together like a 4-song EP and threw it up on Bandcamp.
Oh, that's
uh,
badass.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was an excuse to, to hang out with him and watch him do his magic. Yeah. So if you go on Bandcamp and search the Pallbearers Club, you can see me doing my Bob Mould impersonation.
Oh man, that's awesome, especially with y'all two doing that together. I think that's really badass.
Yeah. And one of the songs, my daughter joined in. We did a cover of Neutral Milk Hotel's King of Carrot Flowers. So Emma did vocals, Cole did all the producing. I just laid down a guitar track and really Cole did the rest of the stuff. And Emma, singing. So yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. The Horror Partridge Family EP.
That's way cool, man. What genres of music do you dig?
So my favorite is certainly I would say punk, post-punk, indie. The Pallbearers Club, which I mentioned, is in a lot of ways, like A Head Full of Ghosts is a love letter to horror. Uh, the Pallbearers Club is sort of a love letter to like 80s and 80s punk and 90s alternative music.
Hmm.
I like most people, I enjoy things from other genres. I do dip into metal a little bit and stuff like that. But I'd say, Husker Du is certainly, if not my favorite, one of my favorites.
That's cool. Yeah, they're a great band. I also like a lot of post punk. I like a lot of new wave 80s stuff. And nowadays, I listen to a shit ton of metal too. Metal's like 80% everything I listen to, but I
Mhm.
also like venture off in other things like synth wave and, some of the like newer, like almost new wave stuff that's out now. There's some really killer bands that are kind of replicating that stuff from the 80s and they're doing it really
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah, I don't know what you would call the band Swans these days, but very much a fan of sort of their later output, starting with The Seer in 2012. Um, and they just came out with a new record, The Beggar, the other day, which is really wild.
yeah, I heard it's a really good record. And one of my friends posted that it definitely has that like unsettling Swans sound going on. They haven't lost that, like scariness to it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Long droning songs. There's one song I've listened to most of it, but it's 2 hours. So I want to try to donate the correct time. I still haven't listened to the 45-minute opus that's on there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Neurosis?
No, I'm aware of them, but I haven't.
Okay, it seems like a band that could be up your alley too, especially since you like dig the Swans and a lot of kind of the post punk, post metal type things. You might dig them for
All
sure.
right, good to know.
Yeah. What's your guitar choice? I always got to know that. What
Oh,
play?
so for a while I had like a cheap Fender Strat, but yeah, for it's probably like 8 years old at this point. I bought an Ibanez,
Hmm.
so that's fun to play with. I used to have a really beat up 12 string that was a lot of fun too. I bought a new like Yamaha 12 string like 5 years ago, and I kind of regret. I missed the old one. The old one just had like a lot of character. Like the bridge was sort of like coming up. That was half the fear was like the bridge was just going to fly off and hit me in the head. Um, yeah, so I mean nothing too super fancy, um, but it is fun just to sometimes plug in and be loud.
Yeah, definitely. That's like one of the best feelings. Do you play with it like a wall of amps, or what kind of amp guy are you? Like
Oh,
minimal or?
yeah, I just have like one small amp.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just bought. I guess that's the newest thing I bought besides a pedal or two was I have an orange amp. But it's
Nice.
like one of those like small rehearsal sort of amps.
Yeah, those are great amps. I have two of them for this
Yeah.
like messing around at the house. One's a 30 watt, which I can barely turn that shit up because I live in a townhouse. So, the
Yeah.
walls aren't that thick, and that
Right.
thing sounds great.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, big fan of those and stuff. Um, what, if you had to like make I guess a top five list of some of your favorite horror movies, what would those be?
Oh, it's funny. That just came up on Twitter. I mean, so
Oh
like
yeah.
I would I'd probably try to break it up into sort of like eras because it's kind of hard to put like movies that I've seen so many times, since a teenager or maybe even younger up against like newer films. But I don't know, in terms of number of times seen and
Hmm.
nightmares given, Jaws, The Thing, American Werewolf in London is a favorite. Um, More recently, though, I would say a movie called Lake Mungo. I've definitely been obsessed with.
It's a good one.
Yeah, my novel After a Head Full of Ghosts is definitely Lake Mungo inspired slash inflected, maybe a little bit too much. um, yeah, and then I'm trying to think over the last 10 years. I mean, this is sort of like people might argue that it's not a horror movie, but it strikes me as a horror movie. But I really love the movie Take Shelter.
Oh, that it's definitely a horror movie, man.
Yeah,
And it deals with some cosmic shit, so it's definitely horror
yeah,
to me. Yeah.
no, love that movie. Um, I don't know, but there's so many. Like a movie, 1999 movie, Ravenous is a lot of fun. I used to write to its soundtrack all the time. So I don't know. I mean, the top three is probably set in stone, but after that, like, things definitely would change. Alien's going to be up there somewhere.
Hmm.
But I think that's an easy, obvious. How can Alien not be
Right.
in the top five or top 10? But yeah.
Yeah, right now it's definitely a Jaws season. It's like this is the perfect time to watch Jaws, especially the start of summer and everything like that.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's right. Now my annual watch of Jaws is definitely coming up soon.
oh no, me and my dad would do that all the time because we used to fish together and stuff. Like we would go shark fishing. So every start of the summertime before we do all that, we'd watch Jaws. And that's just the perfect movie to watch when you're out there fishing for sharks, right?
Nice. Well, I'll
Yeah,
give you a Jaws music recommendation. There's a band called Squalus, and
Squalls.
they had a record in 2017 called The Great Fish, and it's
Hmm.
essentially like this doom metal opera about Jaws. Like the songs follow along.
Nice.
It's only like a couple of bass players and a drummer, but really heavy. The lyrics deal with the movie. It's so much fun to listen to. I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, I think the name kind of rings a bell with me. I've never listened to anything from them, but when you said
Yeah,
doom metal and Jaws, I mean that right there already kind of hit me. So,
nice.
yeah. There's a band. Oh yeah, this I was about I almost forgot the band's name. There's a band called Ahab, and they're like a really heavy doom band, and they did like a whole like fucking album about like whales and stuff, man, and it's like the Great Deep and Cthulhu type stuff, and it's so
Nice.
fucking heavy. So I don't know if you ever heard of them before.
I haven't. No, and I think Squalus is like pieces from another band, maybe Giant Squid, which I don't know a lot of, but I think that might be where some of the dudes from Squalus came from or something. But anyway,
Cool.
Well, then
Yeah.
there's of course Mastodon's, Moby Dick record.
Yeah, that was great, Mastodon. That to me, that was my favorite era of Mastodon. I kind of lost track of Mastodon when it went more into kind of the poppier sound, in the later
Mhm.
records.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely dig those. What are some things you're watching now that you're really digging on?
Oh, yeah. I feel bad because cause I was at a convention. A lot of people are asking, you just ask, hey, what you been watching lately? And I just
Hmm.
have to admit that the spring has been like all sports between the Bruins and the Celtics. I'm a big sports fan, so I just watched a lot of basketball, some hockey, and a lot of hoops.
Hmm.
Um, for me, that's my escape. People sometimes talk about reading as their escape or movies. I love reading and movies, but that's like so close to what sort of I do, and what I am. So for me, like, watching sports is when I get to shut my brain off. So all that said, I haven't watched a ton of stuff within the last like few months, other than like Ted Lasso. It's it's like the one show my wife and my daughter and I all watch and enjoy together.
I'm just getting into Ted Lasso. I think I'm still in the first season, but I had a few
Yeah.
friends recommend that to me. It's a damn good show.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. The first season especially. The second one is weak in the first half, but gets better in the second half. But I don't know. I could just watch Roy Kent swearing all day, so that's sort of my favorite part.
He has like a big Ned Flanders type feel to me, like
Yeah,
from The
yeah, Ted
Simpsons.
Lasso for
Like
sure. Yeah,
he would make a great live action Ned Flanders.
right.
That's cool. Yeah, I watch a ton of stuff, but that's what I like to do. That's my escape from everything else is just watching movies and reading and stuff. And right now I'm going back over the old Dracula novel. I'm doing an audiobook version of that, and that's really fucking cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So, what things are you working on now that you can talk about?
Yeah, so in a few weeks, July 11th, my short story collection, The Beast You Are, comes out. Um, so it's 15 stories. And some of them range from like really small flash pieces to the end of the book is this actually fairly long 150-page novella. Uh, that's sort of my love letter to Watership Down and Animal Farm because it's an anthropomorphic animal novella.
Mhm.
Uh, that also features a giant monster and a cat
Nice.
that might be a slasher,
Oh, I
as all
love that.
cats are, right? So I know
Exactly.
that novella was a lot of fun to write. Hopefully people dig it. Yeah, so that's coming out in a few weeks. I'm waiting on edits from my editor right now for a novel that hopefully will be out next summer. And for the moment, that's being called Horror Movie, a Novel. I only say for the moment, just like knock on wood. Hopefully they let me keep that title because that's what I want it to be.
Hmm.
um, yeah. Otherwise, can't really talk about it too much. But I've got like an Amazon short story coming out in late September, which hopefully is a lot of fun. Um, and I'm actually, who knows if it's any good, but I'm just somewhat randomly trying to write a middle grade novel, like a short middle grade novel. I just happen to have the idea.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so it sounds like a lot of stuff, but that's
Definitely.
what's going on.
That's cool. And you definitely got me at cat slasher, being that I am a cat owner. We have two cats, so and they're definitely in that
Which one?
category.
Which one would be the slasher, and what's its name?
That would be our black cat Lily. She's definitely the slasher out the family because she's always got some evil shit going on, and she's always plotting. We call her Kitty Krueger sometimes because she
Oh,
takes her
nice.
nails and just like scratches on the doors and
Yeah,
everything.
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a dog person. I mean, I like cats. I just never, as an adult, haven't had any cats. I've had two dogs.
Hmm.
So of course the dog's the hero, but I think more people I think more people are gonna like the cat character.
I could definitely see that though, the dog being the hero or like I guess the innocent one out the two. I can
Right.
totally see that. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, cats and dogs, I tell you. Yeah. And we need more cat horror. We need more animal horror, and also more creature horror. I'm a big fan of that because of like Lovecraft and everything. So
Yeah. No, I've always
that's
like
cool.
wanted to, and I haven't done it yet. Although I kind of feel like it's close enough with this collection. Not all the stories feature monsters or creatures, but I would say at least like a third of them feature giant monsters. And then maybe a handful feature, people acting as monstrous. So I mean, it's sort of the loose theme throughout the collection, to go along with the title of The Beast You Are. But yeah, no, I mean, giant monsters were my first love with Godzilla. So I've always wanted to write like a giant monster novel. But I don't think I have to because I've written so many short stories with them, including the Amazon one's going to have a giant monster in it too. Um, yeah, so the anthropomorphic animal novella is as close as I get to the giant monster novel for now, I guess.
Excellent. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I got to catch up on the rest of your work as well. I'm making my way through, because so much Stephen King has taken so much of my time over
Oh,
the
sure.
years. Like, yeah, I'm telling you, like, and you go down a rabbit hole, like you said, and, like he just came out with Fairy Tale, which was excellent, and
Yep.
that was a big book that took forever. So I'm slowly working my way out of the King spot there.
Not a bad place to be.
No, not at all. Well, Paul, I appreciate you being on my podcast. This was a great talk, and I'm really looking forward to your new stuff.
Well, thank you, Brandon. Yeah, thanks for having me. And nice chatting.
Yes, you have a good weekend, and talk to you later.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.